My thinking exactly, Josiah. Perhaps with the late stream, we can get a mystical Father Stephen cameo, perhaps to at least call out Rohlin on the Raw after WrestleMania. I have no idea what Raw after WrestleMania you're talking about, but Father Seraphim. Apparently, deacons are called father by a lot of people in Eastern Orthodoxy based on the tradition, because and from what I understand, Seraphim is looking towards possibly becoming an ordained priest. It seems that way to me. Will the Kabbalistic sorcerers please stand up? Yes. We haven't seen Father Stephen in forever. Well, you have to remember Orthodox Easter was recently. And also, my streams have not been in the middle of the night like they used to be, because I now have to get up and go to my shifts at the locked ward that I am working at. Hard to believe, May 9th is my last day, and then I'm going to graduate. That's like 1, 2, 3 weeks, not even 3 weeks left. Yeah. So I actually kind of made a hello everyone, including Garth. I actually made a thank you, Josiah. I made a kind of pre-response. Has it been 2 months already? Let me see, how long ago was it when I made the response? Called Real Kabbalah back so it doesn't have a lot of views. It only has 241 views, but I streamed it February 15th, partially in anticipation of this video coming out by our good friends here. And honestly, when I saw the video drop, I was prepared for cringe. I have offered multiple times to Jonathan Pageau to help. And I did have an opportunity to speak to him once about this type of stuff briefly. And I actually encouraged him to get more involved. He is aware that many people in his audience have ridiculous anti-Semitic views. I'm pretty sure he's said this multiple times, that what he finds to be obviously silly among the anti-Semites is that they invariably both blame the Jews for killing Jesus and claim that we are not Jews. And he very rightly states that you can't believe both of those. Like, one of the two. Like, I guess, I mean, I haven't seen anybody intelligently answer, oh, we blame these people for picking up the traditions of people who killed whatever. Because, I mean, the definition of anti-Semitism is that it tends to be ridiculous. And that's how you know that it is anti-Semitic, is that it is not coherent. I have said this multiple times in various videos of mine that is my background not... What happened to my background? Somebody... There's my background. Okay. I have said this multiple times. It's hard to do a refutation of anti-Semitism because the defining characteristic of the anti-Semitism is its incoherence, and that's how you know that it is anti-Semitic, is when it is incoherent. You can criticize Jews, that's not anti-Semitic. You can criticize Judaism, that's not anti-Semitic. It's when you do it in an obviously ridiculous way, that's when it becomes anti-Semitic. And Pageau is aware that like when he posts anything, he ends up getting incredibly stupid misinterpretations of what he said. And so they were both very, very careful. They didn't actually really say much. I mean, I could play the video, but they stayed away from all of the things that I was afraid would become possibly cringeworthy, possibly weird things to say. By the way, here is the link in case anyone has particular questions, or if you have timestamps or particular things that they said. I didn't find anything they said objectionable, but I also didn't find there to be much content because they were trying to stay away from it, which is understandable. At the same time, I think it's kind of obvious that this is an important issue. I also, as has become my custom, decided to ask Grok a question, which I think might be worthwhile for people to consider. Let's make this bigger. So I asked Grok, explain the relationship between the Philokalia and the Kabbalah. I want 3 different views: that of secular historians, Eastern Orthodox Christians, and Orthodox Jews. And Grok thought about this for a whole minute and 4 seconds, which should tell you it's not an easy thing to talk about. And frankly, from reading its answer regarding, well, first of all, its answer regarding the Eastern Orthodox view was to a Facebook discussion. Its answer regarding the Kabbalah was not particularly good. So I am not particularly confident in what it says, but yeah, this might be a more fruitful thinking about it. So there is no direct historical, textual, or doctrinal relationship between the Philokalia and the Kabbalah. They emerged in separate religious traditions with distinct origins, goals, and theological frameworks. The Philokalia, love of the beautiful, good, is an 18th century compilation first published in Greek in 1782 by Saint Nicodemus of the Holy Mountain and Saint Macarius of Corinth, of earlier Eastern Christian ascetic and mystical writings, 4th to 15th centuries, centered on hesychasm, inner stillness, the Jesus prayer, purification of the heart and mind, and theosis, deification through participation in God's uncreated energies. The Kabbalah receiving tradition refers to medieval Jewish mystical traditions emerging prominently in 12th to 13th century in Provence and Spain, crystallized in the Zohar. I don't like this, and partially, as you will see later, It will talk about Gershom Scholem. Here, we'll finish reading this, and then I will say why I think it's a useful framework to think about this. Focused on esoteric interpretations of the Torah, the Sefirot, divine emanations, attributes, tikkun, repair of the world, and contemplative union with the divine through symbolic study and practice. Scholars occasionally note typological parallels, similar mystical motifs like apophatic theology, the unknowable God approached via the heart, contemplative prayer techniques, or hierarchical descriptions of divine realities, such as a tenfold spiritual structure in some Philokalia texts compared to the 10 Sefirot, often traced to shared broader influences like Neoplatonism or universal features of Abrahamic mysticism. However, these are independent developments with no evidence of a direct borrowing or influence between the core traditions. Here are the three perspectives you requested, drawn from mainstream scholarly, ecclesial, and traditional sources in each community, like Facebook. Okay, one, view of secular historians and academic scholars of religion. Secular historians treat the Philokalia and Kabbalah as parallel but independent expressions of mystical spirituality within Christianity and Judaism, respectively. They developed in overlapping historical periods, Kabbalah peaking in the 13th to 16th century, many Philokalia source texts from the 4th to 14th centuries compiled later. I mean, let's finish reading and then I'll address it. But in different cultural and linguistic contexts, Byzantine Orthodox Christians versus Jewish communities in medieval Europe and the Mediterranean, there is no documented transmission of ideas from one to the other. Any similarities are attributed to convergent evolution, shared Hellenistic philosophical legacies, such as Neoplatonic ideas of emanation, the unknowable divine, and ascent of the souls, or common biblical roots rather than direct contact or influence. Obviously, you would assume that that both religions viewing the most important, prominent text as being the Bible, and I mean, even a knowledgeable Christian acknowledges the 5 books of Moses as fundamental to their religion. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of overlap when you have that foundation, which is why people who say there's no such thing as Judeo-Christian are obviously silly. But let's keep on going. Academic works, e.g. comparative studies in volumes on mysticism, highlight phenomenological affinities such as ecstatic prayer, divine light imagery, or structured approaches to contemplating the divine, but stress fundamental differences in theology, e.g. Trinitarian Christology and uncreated energies in hesychasm versus the Sephirotic system and Torah-centered symbolism in Kabbalah. Historians like those studying Gershom Scholem's legacy. So to explain who Gershom Scholem is, Gershom Scholem was the father of the academic study of Jewish mysticism. He basically invented the field, and I mean, you have to give him respect for that. He came from a very, 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 very embedded in 19th century Germanic scholarship worldview, and that certainly showed in a lot of his early works, which some people claim he later recanted of. His students, most prominently Moshe Idel, have certainly dismissed a lot of the most outrageous things that Gershom Scholem said. For example, asserting that the Kabbalah is an invention of the past 1,000 years. Like, that's just not. It's just completely not. Yeah, you can argue it, but it's just bad argument. And Gershom Scholem, like, trying to be the German scholar that he was, adopted that, and it's become the type of thing that Grok basically agrees to, because it has pervaded a lot of secular scholarship, especially among Christians. Certainly, as a religious Jew, I reject it completely, but I would say even the academic view no longer, like, Moshe Idel isn't exactly a religious. I mean, he's an Orthodox Jew, and he's a better Jew than I am, but he's not exactly a religious authority within Orthodox Judaism, and he certainly has revised a lot of what Gershom Scholem said. Or comparative mysticism emphasize that these are best understood as distinct mystical traditions within their faiths, not as interconnected lineages. Claims of deeper links are usually dismissed as speculative or belonging to esoteric occult syncretism rather than rigorous history. And here we go with the Facebook view of what Eastern Orthodox Christians believe. Eastern Orthodox Christians regard the Philokalia as one of the most important spiritual texts after the Bible itself, a practical manual for the spiritual life, guiding believers, especially through hesychasm and the Jesus prayer, toward inner purification, illumination, and theosis within the sacramental life of the church. It embodies the authentic patristic tradition of the Desert Fathers, Saint Gregory Palamas, and Athonite elders. Like, it's citing Medium, doesn't inspire confidence. Kabbalah, by contrast, is generally viewed as incompatible with Orthodox Christianity and often rejected outright. It is seen as a non-Christian esoteric system that mixes speculative philosophy, occult elements, and reinterpretations of Scripture in ways that distort biblical monotheism and ignore or implicitly deny the centrality of Jesus Christ as the fulfillment of the law and the sole mediator. Mainstream Orthodox sources describe it as potentially leading into heresy, pantheism, or magical practices foreign to the church's Christocentric ecclesial mysticism. While some informal comparisons note superficial resemblances to hesychasm, e.g., contemplative prayer or divine attributes, these are dismissed as coincidental or incomplete. True union with God occurs only through the Orthodox path of grace, the sacraments, and the Jesus prayer, not through Jewish mystical systems. Engagement with Kabbalah is discouraged as unnecessary and spiritually risky. Citation, Facebook. View of Orthodox Jews. Orthodox Jews who engage with Kabbalah, accepted in varying degrees across communities. I am sorry, but it is not accepted in varying degrees across communities. What is the Kabbalah is universal in how Judaism is practiced today in any synagogue that is large enough to have an actual sign outside its door. There are certainly individuals who have certain views, and as I made clear in hopefully when I did my other video, The Real Kabbalah, it should be clear that the study of the Kabbalah itself is considered advanced Judaism, not something to be taught publicly, not something for beginners. And so that leads Grok to believe the things that Grok does, whatever. Central in Hasidic and many Sephardic traditions, studied more cautiously or esoterically in others. It's studied esoterically in all fields, while the Hasidic and Sephardic communities believe that much has been revealed with permission of heaven over the past 500 years, which was previously not public knowledge. And that's the real crux of the difference. The Jewish belief, the Orthodox Jewish belief, is that certain gates in heaven were opened 500 years ago with the revelations of the Torah of Rabbi Isaac Luria, who we believe was visited by, received instruction from, and taught things of Elijah the prophet. Yes. Despite the reluctance of people to say this, especially because they might sound like they believe in the supernatural and in Elijah the prophet, it is basically a universal, like undeniable belief of Orthodox Judaism that Rabbi Yosef Karo was being visited by an angel, a Magid, an angel who helped him compose things like the Code of Jewish Law, the Shulchan Aruch, and who taught him Torah on a regular basis, and that the Arizal, who similarly lived in Tzfat, Safed at the time, had visitations of at least Elijah the prophet, but also probably other divine figures. And so we believe that there were revelations made 500 years ago in the town of Tzfat, and there was a serious change in our view towards what can be discussed publicly. Okay. View it as the soul of the Torah, an authentic, divinely revealed esoteric dimension of Jewish tradition, transmitted through figures like the Ari, that's Rabbi Isaac Luria of blessed memory, and rooted in the Zohar and earlier sources. It deepens observance of mitzvot, reveals hidden meanings in Scripture, and facilitates tikkun, that is rectification, and closeness to God within the covenant of Israel. The Philokalia and Hesychasm have no place in Jewish tradition and are seen simply as a form of Christian mysticism. While some modern Jewish scholars of comparative religion may note parallels in contemplative practices or even explore possible ancient Jewish mystical influences on early Christian thought, Merkava or Hechalot literature, Orthodox Judaism does not recognize any substantive relationship or borrowing relevant to Jewish practice. From this perspective, Christian mysticism, like that in the Philokalia, is a separate path that, while sincere for its adherents, operates outside the Torah's covenants and lacks the fullness of Kabbalistic insight into the divine structure as revealed specifically to Israel. There is no theological imperative to engage with it. The two are distinct spiritual systems belonging to different faiths. In summary, while comparative mysticism finds interesting resonances, the consensus across these perspectives is that the Philokalia and Kabbalah represent autonomous traditions with no meaningful historical interconnection, each valued deeply within its own religious world. let's see what people had to say. Is Shabbatai Tzvi really that big in Kabbalah? First time I hear about him was at Pageau's. Shabbatai Tzvi was a heretic who was a very prominent false messiah in Jewish history. To the contrary of Christian assertions, we, within the Jewish community, speak of Shabbatai Tzvi a lot. He historically has been very prominent as one of the many, many false messiahs who have been through the ages, and one of the very obvious false messiahs. In fact, I would say to some extent, probably more Jews are aware of Shabbatai Tzvi than, for example, Bar Kokhba, who historically maybe was more influential. The fact is, we rarely discuss with Christians false messiahs because we believe that Christians fell for another false messiah. Generally, the fact is that we talk about the danger of false messianism in Judaism a lot, and to the degree that Shabbatai Tzvi is not spoken about outside Jewish circles, it is more to not offend Christians than it is any sort of shame. We have had many, many false messiahs in our history, and he is certainly one of the most prominent, if not the most prominent. He was very influential. He himself was also very Kabbalistic. Large numbers of Jews, possibly a majority of the world's Jews, at one time thought Shabbatai Tzvi was a good candidate for being the Messiah. Many people followed him, and they came to not a good end. And after that, Judaism again reaffirmed its very strong belief that false messianism is a bad idea. While I still have a picture of Rabbi Shlomo Be'eri, the Yanuka, up on my wall, and every hope that he, if the Messiah were to come, that he may in fact be that Messiah. He's certainly the best candidate I know of today. I, unlike most of my Christian friends, spent a lot of time talking about the advice of Gamaliel in Acts 5, that you should not be found to be a partisan of any possible Messiah, because you might find yourself going way wrong. And I wish Christians would remember this. Deacon says, his failure is a major point in the history of Judaism in general. Yeah, correct. The possible impact of Nathan of Gaza on the later development of tradition is something I prefer to avoid discussing, but I've heard some scholars say it is important in that regard too. Yeah, it is quite possible that Nathan of Gaza and some Sabbateans were influential in later Judaism. There were many, many purges and many accusations of people. I prefer to avoid discussing it because I don't know enough about that. Wow, Jikian, you prefer not to discuss things you don't know a lot about. You, sir, are a mighty man among men. Kabbalah smash? What? Can we go through basic Kabbalah, or is that in Nabbalah? I might just do that. Is the Philokalia basically the Pirkei Avot of Christianity? You will have to ask the Eastern Orthodox that. I know that they revere it greatly, and I don't want to say something that people might find not good. I think that Eastern Orthodox Christians find it to be a very important part of their faith in general. It's less focused on ethics in general and more focused on the practice of prayer, but it is a compilation. So there's that in common, at least. Obviously, there's some moral teaching in it, but I would say the tone is fairly different between those two. Okay. Give us the deep secrets, Jacob. The Philokalia is also mostly, if not exclusively, writings made for monastics. So this is an important point, and the reason why I brought up the comparison. Eastern Orthodoxy, like Orthodox Judaism, has a belief that there is an esoteric, a mystical dimension to a full religious involvement, right? A full expression of our religion requires a hierarchy and esotericism and growth and the potential for growth and an acknowledgement that some people have greater revelation than others. And we both believe that there existed during the time of Jesus and before the time of Jesus a valid esoteric tradition within Judaism as it existed, and we both believe that we continue that tradition, right? And like I often say to Father Stephen, my disagreement with him is, who do we believe is the true continuation of the true religion of Judaism that existed when Jesus, so as opposed to an idea that many Christians have, which is Judaism is the religion that was being practiced before Christianity, before Jesus. And then Jesus came and this is basically a Marcionite idea, got rid of those Jewish mistakes. And I have to ask at this point, where do you believe these Jewish mistakes originated from, right? Who exactly taught Jews to believe wrong things? And frankly, it's certainly not the view of the early church. I have to say that, right? The early church did not believe. They believed that Jesus came in fulfillment of Judaism and that it is a continuation of Judaism, right? And so Marcionism, which is rampant in Christianity, is not a very good and coherent understanding of Christianity. So the question becomes, so who has rightfully continued what was Judaism during the time of Jesus? I would say that Orthodox Judaism is, whereas Christians would often say Orthodox Christians would say Orthodox Christianity is. How are you doing, Nick?
I'm doing well. How about you, Jacob?
I am doing well. I am going to finish the rest of these comments, and then we can talk. Jacob, can the Reform really even do Kabbalah, though? Well, mostly not because they don't know much Hebrew, but they certainly try. Shimon Bar Yochai is more interesting than Luria. Let's talk about him. Okay. Glad to help. Is Kabbalah metaphysics? No. How meta? I don't understand what you're saying. Yeah, Quora. Exactly. Lego story. Hello. I wouldn't describe Christian mysticism as esoteric. I am Eastern Orthodox. I would say the Eastern Orthodox would describe Christian mysticism as esoteric. Frankly, I have to wonder why you don't like the idea that it is esoteric. Didn't Kabbalah mysticism develop much after Christianity, near the time of the schism with the Catholics? That is certainly what a lot of people believe. That is certainly not what Orthodox Jews believe. I would question the continuation aspect there, obviously. Kabbalah, sure, but a mystical tradition, no. Yes, there definitely was a mystical tradition that was older. Merkava mysticism is precisely older than Christianity. Yes, quite clearly, Merkava mysticism, and to the degree which we certainly believe that the Lurianic Kabbalah is a continuation of the Merkava mysticism, then obviously we believe that this goes back all the way to Moses. And Kabbalah does kind of just mean tradition after all. Yes, it does. Shalom, Chazi. You're more than welcome to jump on, although it's like 6 a.m., I believe, where you are. How are you doing, Nick?
I'm doing well. School's got like 2 more weeks left, so crawling my way to the finish line. But yeah, I came to like just learn and listen to what you were talking about with Kabbalah and mysticism.
Did you have questions?
Nothing specifically. I didn't watch the video, even though I sent it to the group chat. Someone said that it's kind of just like basic and kind of sloppish.
I wouldn't say sloppish, but they stick.
Okay.
They stuck. I mean, they were talking about U.S. history more than they were talking about Kabbalah, right? And I'm sure a lot of people were watching, hoping, and Deacon Seraphim. I hope that's the correct way of addressing him.
Yeah.
He was adamant that you will never get him to fully like explicate mysticism because he doesn't believe that that's his place, which shows that he's a smarter man than I am. As Chazi said, everyone here is talking out of school, and I readily admit that I am speaking out of school. I just have to say I am your fool, and fools tread where angels fear to go. So here we are. I've heard so many arguments about how the modern Jewish Pharisaic faith is not the faith of Abraham, but I want to say, stay peaceful here, as you guys seem to be very respectful. Feel free to, I mean, we talk about these arguments all the time, but part of the reason that my discussions with Father Stephen have been more fruitful, I think, than generally those discussions is those arguments is because those arguments, I believe, are so obviously false that while I can sit there and refute them, when I talk to somebody like Father Stephen, who has better arguments, more respectable arguments, more coherent arguments, more worthwhile arguments, then I just think it makes for a much better discussion. Father Stephen and I have real disagreements, which we openly. I mean, he understands my position, and I understand his position. So yeah, I basically get all my opinions from Father Stephen. Lol. Well, if you agree with Father Stephen, I am not sure why you would say that Eastern Orthodoxy isn't esoteric. I would say this book by Father Stephen is basically completely an argument that Eastern Orthodoxy is esoteric. So I don't know if you've read this book. And I do have to be a little bit of a name dropper. Father Stephen actually sent me this book. So even though he didn't sign it, he did send it to me. By esoteric, I simply mean that the idea that certain things are not meant for public discussion. Eastern Orthodoxy and Orthodox Judaism believe that quite wholeheartedly. I think at least many Catholics do as well, although some Catholics would say no. Protestants often, obviously, there's nothing you can say that actually is true of all Protestants. But Protestants oftentimes will deny esotericism in Christianity. I think that comes from profound ignorance. So let's pull up Paul of Tarsus. Was it second heaven he visited or third heaven? Third heaven. I always get that wrong. So 2 Corinthians 12. 2 Corinthians 12. We've read this before, but we might as well read it again. Feel free to interrupt if there's something you want to ask about. It is not expedient for me, doubtless, to glory. I will come to visions and revelations of the Lord. I knew a man in Christ above 14 years ago, whether in the body I cannot tell, or whether out of the body I cannot tell. God knoweth. Such as one caught up to the third heaven. And I knew such a man, whether in the body or out of the body, I cannot tell. God knoweth, how that he was caught up into paradise and heard unspeakable words, which it is not lawful for a man to utter. Of such an one will I glory, yet of myself I will not glory, but in my infirmities. For though I would desire to glory, I shall not be a fool. For I will say the truth, but now I forbear, lest any man should think of me above that which he seeth me to be, or that he heareth of me, and lest I should be exalted above measure through the abundance of the revelations. There was given to me a thorn in the flesh, the messenger of Satan to buffet me, lest I should be exalted above measure. For this thing I besought the Lord thrice, that it might depart from me. And he said unto me, my grace is sufficient for thee, for my strength is made perfect in weakness. Most gladly, therefore, I will rather glory in my infirmities than the power of Christ, that the power of Christ may rest upon me. I don't see how a Christian reads this part of their own Bible and misunderstands what the esoteric nature of Christianity.
I think I would disagree with that.
We will get to that as soon as I give a receipt, Kabbalah, to Yoav for the 30 new Israeli shekels. And I have to say, while 30 new Israeli shekels used to be $7.50, it is now $10. So thank you for the $10. You would disagree with what?
Like you were saying that Eastern Orthodoxy as a religion is esoteric?
Yes.
I mean, Eastern Orthodox would say that like the faith is for everybody.
The faith is for everybody, but the philokalia is not.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Okay, I thought you were referring to like the faith religion as a whole.
Well, I mean, we would say the same thing about Judaism, right? Judaism is for everybody, but studying Kabbalah is not.
Okay, yeah, no, that makes sense. I agree with that. It's other stuff.
Yeah. Chazi says, when they misunderstood Kucha Brichu Kolachad, who Oraita Kucha Brichu is Oraita Israel Kulachad, it was all downhill. Yeah, I would agree with that, but like Don said, you're not understanding, and there is some degree to which we should probably actually stay away from being silly people speaking out of school, even when we're as silly as I am. I already read that. Some of us are trying to keep up here. Sure, I'd love. I read that already. Eastern Orthodox at least talk about enough about theosis. I am ethnically like 35% Sephardic, if that means anything at all. I desire so badly to talk to Jewish religious people. You're more than welcome to jump on, and we can talk. And it matters to me if your mother or your maternal grandmother or her mother were Jewish, because that would make you halachically Jewish. But otherwise, I mean, a lot of, basically all of Latin America is 35% Sephardic Jewish. It was third F, and yes. Rabbi Ben Amuzog spoke about this topic. Not sure which topic you mean. Slightly related, but do you have many thoughts about the channel Esoterica? I really enjoy his content. Yes, I have many, many opinions about the channel Esoterica, including the reason I will not endorse Zevi Slavin's channel wholeheartedly is because he spends way too much time with the channel Esoterica. I am not a fan at all in any sense. It hasn't gotten to the point where I have felt the necessity to do a takedown video, but I've been close.
I used to watch some of his stuff, and he said in one of his videos that Paul was of like some Jewish mysticism school, and he thinks that when Paul says that like Jesus visited him on the road to Emmaus, like he was practicing that Jewish mysticism, like praying in the temple with like incense and all that, and he apparently like Esoterica thinks that Paul was just hallucinating.
He says a lot of things. Ultimately, I believe he's a materialist, and I have serious problems with people who wear a yarmulke and a long beard for show. Yeah, not my type of guy. Mysticism is not the same as esotericism. Okay, let's just do the horrible thing of asking Merriam-Webster how you define esotericism. Webster dictionary. Esotericism esoteric doctrines are, let's go look up esoteric, designed for or understood by the specially initiated alone, requiring or exhibiting knowledge that is restricted to a small group, limited to a small circle, of special, rare, or unusual interest. That's what I mean by esotericism, and I'm using it advisedly, not as a sort of synonym for mysticism, although I believe any genuine mysticism has to be esoteric. But that's a separate debate. If Paul was truly a student of Rabban Gamliel, he would have known about the seven heavens. Well, I mean, apparently he knew at least of the third heaven. Eastern Orthodoxy is not esoteric. It has an esoteric dimension. Okay, then Judaism is not esoteric. It has an esoteric dimension. Fine. I am very happy for you. Pretty much every tradition, major tradition, does. There are many Christians who claim that having any esoteric dimension makes you bad people. I think YouTube changed it so you can't retract shielded comments. I don't know. The Philokalia is just spiritual wisdom. It's applied wisdom for monastic circles, how to talk to your abbot, etc. They're very profound, and I'd argue very applicable to a lay person. I think you would have to argue with the Eastern Orthodox about that. As I understand it, that's not the Eastern Orthodox view. Anyway, I would say we should correct the New Age types and Freemasons, even speaking out of school. Yeah, but it's hard to go around connecting people. It's my mother's mother from Portugal. Well, if you can actually show that your maternal grandmother, as many lines ago, was Jewish, that would then mean that you are Jewish by Jewish standards, according to Jewish law. If your tradition doesn't have an esoteric dimension, it shouldn't be called a tradition at all, really. I would agree with you, but again, we have the Protestants. It is intellectually appealing to practice esotericism, initiation rituals, etc. It's why many hate what Christ established. Too simple, but not easy. Okay. I mean, if that's your view, you can have your view. I believe it is very important to recognize that different people are different people, and different people understand things to different degrees. And when you don't understand that, you end up destroying the world.
Yeah, you don't want to turn these like esoteric things into occults either.
Correct.
Because it seems like that can very easily happen. Like, there's like sort of this weird obsession by a lot of people with like the Jews, and like it can start out as like a joke for many people or just conspiracy, but these people can like really become obsessed and in this weird way with Jews. And I think for a lot of Americans, like Judaism, it's not too well known, and so like you hear a lot about like the rich Jews behind the scenes running America, and it can seem very occultish, and just
okay. So let's distinguish between esoteric and occult. Esoteric is the belief that there are certain things there that are exoteric, that are for public consumption, and other things which are esoteric, which are not for public consumption. The occult is the belief that which is exoteric is opposed to that which is esoteric, right? That we have to hide things, right? So what I would say is the difference is Judaism teaches it's wrong to murder people, right? That's exoteric Judaism. Esoteric Judaism still teaches it's wrong to murder people. What people think about the occult is, oh, the people who are initiated into your cult, right, can go ahead and murder people and basically nullify the exoteric. I think that should obviously, like, you should realize that's a silly idea, right? The analogy I often make is to arithmetic, geometry, algebra, and calculus, right? So in arithmetic, we know that you cannot divide by 0, and we know that 2 plus 2 equals 4. In algebra, we still know that you cannot divide by 0, and 2 plus 2 equals 4. And in calculus, despite the fact that you may be taking the limit of a function as x approaches 0 of 1 over x, you still cannot divide by 0, and 2 plus 2 still equals 4. That is a progression of further understanding. And not everyone will understand calculus, right? I personally never went beyond calculus. There are people who went into much higher math. But no matter how high of math you go, 2 plus 2 still equals 4, and you cannot divide by 0. Because higher math does not negate arithmetic or your times tables or algebra or any of the other things. And I think that is what people need to understand about esoteric dimensions of religion, which they often don't. Dawn says, Gemini says that mysticism is about the transcendent experience and esotericism is about hidden knowledge, just to get my definition straight. I would really love to see some second opinions, takedowns of the channel's content. Which channel? My. It's impossible to take down my opinions. My opinions are all right, are all true. Everything I say, I have never made a mistake. Chazi may try to jump on after he drops his kids off. The esoteric guy explicitly states he is a Marxist materialist. Yep. That said, I don't remember him saying Paul was just hallucinating in his video about Paul's relation to Merkava. He says a lot of things. I'm not sure I always find him to be saying similar things. I think he views his job as an entertainer, and I don't hate entertainers. People can be entertainers. I would prefer that people who entertain don't wear a yarmulke and a beard. My religion is not a costume for you to wear when you beclown yourself. He does probably believe that, though. Yeah. Is there a Discord you guys join or something to talk about? Yes, there's a link to my Discord in the description of this video. Nick is too combative. I think he's joking. Limud Maaseh HaMerkava et Maaseh Bereshit at the time needed to be hidden, if you say so. I think where our definitions differ is context. Those spiritual experiences that Paul had are open to all Eastern Orthodox in communion according to God's will. It isn't a sect within us, but God distributes to each. I would say the exact same thing about Kabbalah, right? Ultimately, everyone can try to understand more and more about Judaism until they are ready to. Once you have mastered Mishnah and Talmud and obviously Tanakh, then you are more than welcome to study the Kabbalah. It's a matter of, again, if you don't know your times tables, you shouldn't be pretending you know algebra and calculus. And that's what it feels like a lot of people who talk about Kabbalah. Like, I freely admit, like, there are people who think that I personally study Kabbalah and like deny it publicly because of believing in esotericism, etc. And it's like, no, if you're an Orthodox Jew, you know that somebody who, like me, has not studied the entirety of the Talmud is not studying Kabbalah, because a requirement of further study into the Kabbalistic is a firm grounding in the Talmud. Now, Chazi and Yosef, both of whom have firm groundings in the Talmud, I expect, have actually studied some Zohar, etc., and some of the esoteric tradition, because they have achieved the level to do so. I haven't. Yoav says, I do not understand Chazi either. Yeah, much of what Chazi has been saying in Hebrew is advanced Judaism. Miracles are greater than mysticism. You sound like a Protestant. It isn't a dichotomy at all. Yeah, Deacon, you don't sound like a Protestant. One Kabbalah a day keeps the Shindalids away. The lines get blurry because many esoteric systems, like Kabbalah, provide the map, esotericism, to reach the destination, mystical union, more from Gemini. Correct. So part of the idea of esoteric mysticism is that mysticism is dangerous advanced spirituality, and therefore needs to be esoteric, because someone who is not prepared would be endangering themselves by engaging in mysticism. So the idea is, to be a mystic, you need to first be initiated. Elijah is a mystic, and prophets of Baal are mystics. Let's see who has the covering of the highest power, miracle of fire. I would say you completely misunderstand Elijah and the prophets of Baal, but that's just me.
Yeah, I think it's good for like the average layperson to at least know a little bit about this mysticism stuff and be open to it, because even many like religious people, like Christians, are still very much materialists and like think that, you know, like miracles and mysticisms, like stuff of the Old Testament, Old Covenant, and all that stuff's gone now. So I think the average person can still learn a lot from it, even if they're not full-blown mystics or hesychasts.
Correct. And I think, yeah, I think in a sense, all prayer is mystical.
Yeah.
Okay, Jacob, at least dispel the idea Kabbalah teaches one to make a golem or otherwise practice witchcraft necromancy. Okay, you just did that. I don't think anybody even close to serious believes that. I mean, go ahead and find me a recipe for making a golem or practicing witchcraft in the Zohar. You won't be able to do it.
So did Jonathan Pageau and Deacon Seraphim Rohlin, did they actually say that Kabbalah shaped America, or was that kind of just clickbait?
No. They said it, and they're right.
Kabbalah shaped America. How so?
So what happened was that the founding fathers and a lot of the Protestant founders. So Yale University used to require, and I believe Harvard did as well, that everybody take Hebrew, right? So there was an idea of, first of all, a lot of them were Freemasons. Like a lot of the founding fathers in the United States were Freemasons, and Freemasonry was influenced by Kabbalah, certainly Christian Kabbalah, but even by Jewish Kabbalah, because Freemasonry is perennialist. So to explain, perennialism is the idea that all religions have truth in them. And so there's hard perennialism and soft perennialism. Hard perennialism is, it doesn't matter what your religion you are, any religion is fine. Just, pick a religion, and that's, any religion's as good as any other. I think pretty much everybody disagrees with hard perennialism. Chazi, you're something wrong with your. Oh, there you go. There you are. Hello. Soft perennialism is the idea that all religions have some truth in them, which Vatican II was very keen on. I personally was pretty keen on that as well, and
I think the Catholics go way too far though in saying that Christians and Muslims worship the same God.
I think that's ultimately true. I think for the vast majority of Christians and Muslims, their understanding of God is very, very similar. Like the vast majority of Muslims, it seems to me, like.
But how can you say that they worship the same God when one believes in a Trinity and the other doesn't?
But vast majority of Christians have no clue what the Trinity is. Like they, like.
But even though the masses don't properly understand what they're doing, like that doesn't affect like the actual root. You know what I'm saying?
It actually does.
Yeah, it's like the vast majority of lay Muslims and lay Christians, as far as they understand, we believe in a God who created the world and who's our Father and wants us to do good things and not bad things. Like,
but I would hope that any Christian would think that Jesus is God.
But what does that mean? Like,
yeah.
let's take the example. First of all, Nick, I hope you and your family are doing well. Let's take the example of water, right? I can't remember who gives this example, but water could be a liquid, could be vapor, could be ice. Yes, it's all still water, right? So if you want to look at the Trinity like that, it's one thing that's split into three different things, but they're all the same thing. That mysterious idea of the Trinity for most Christians, like Jacob says, ultimately for them in their brain, it just means it's a mystery we don't understand, but ultimately the source is one. Great. So as far as Jews are concerned, right? Like you're in the club.
Yeah, and yes, the water analogy is definitely heretical to Christianity. That doesn't stop anybody. That's modalism, Patrick. Yes, it is, Patrick. It is, in fact, modalism, Patrick.
I wanted to, if you don't mind, Jacob, I just wanted to just double click on the seventh heaven idea. I could do like a short little reading on this.
Sure. What are you reading from?
Class that I gave once translated into Hebrew, in English. Okay, forgot the introduction. The seven heavens in the Talmud. The Talmud, Tractate Chagiga, 12b, presents a debate about how many heavens exist. Rabbi Yehuda says there are two heavens based on the verse, Behold the heavens and the heaven. Behold, the heavens and the heaven of heavens belong to the Lord of gods. Rish Lakish says there are seven heavens and names them. Vilon, Rakia, Shechina, Zvul, Ma'on, Machon, Aravot. How is this dispute understood? This dispute reflects different spiritual perspectives. One view sees the heavens as a unified structure, grouping malchut, sovereignty, and the 6 emotional attributes, the 6 ends of the 6 lower sefirot, together. The other sees them as distinct levels, each representing a specific spiritual function specific spiritual function or revelation. Let's talk through the 7 levels briefly. Vilon, curtain. This heaven doesn't do anything. It opens in the morning and closes in the evening. It symbolizes malchut, which in Kabbalah is said to have nothing of its own. It merely receives and reflects the divine energy of higher sefirot. Just like the Jewish people reflect the divine light and don't generate it autonomously, so too malchut is a vessel of divine reception. Rakia, the visible sky, contains the sun, the moon, the stars, and the constellations. Described in Genesis, God set them in the firmament, rakia of the heavens. Shchakim, it's in Hebrew would be sort of mills. This is where the mystical mills grind manna for the righteous, as per Psalms and the Midrash. This is a very poetic way to describe divine sustenance that transcends the physical realm. Zvul, the dwelling place. This heaven contains the heavenly Jerusalem, the heavenly temple, the altar, Michael the archangel who offers sacrifices on it. It corresponds to the temple service as it exists in this realm. Question. Okay. Now, the question we would ask over here is, which of these heavens seem most incompatible with Christian theology? The answer is Zvul, the 4th heaven. Why? Because it contains the heavenly temple, an idea that doesn't align with Christian theology, which replaces the temple services with a faith in Jesus. Paul in the 3rd heaven. In the New Testament, in Corinthians that Paul just read about the 3rd heaven, Paul refers to himself in the 3rd person. He claims he ascended to the 3rd heaven, but says he cannot describe what he saw. Why is it significant? Because according to the Talmud, the list, right? There's 1, we just said, Vilon, Rakia, Shchakim. Paul stops at the 3rd, Shchakim, the heavens of divine sustenance for the righteous. He does not claim that he has reached Zvul, where the temple and the divine service are found. This absence is theologically significant. Paul cannot reach or integrate the concept of malchut, the divine presence manifesting in the world through a people, a land, a temple. Paul had studied under Rabban Gamliel, allegedly, a leading Pharisaic sage. He would have known about all the 7 heavens, but intentionally conceals the deeper levels, perhaps out of caution or awareness of their spiritual weight. However, Christianity as a movement did not preserve that discretion. Like many messianic or spiritual movements, it eventually revealed the secret to the masses and reinterpreted it, replacing Israel and Malchut with Jesus. Okay, the key move over here is Christianity replaced the concept of Malchut, right, with the divination of a single individual. Why is this a problem? In Judaism, God chooses a nation, not an individual. The Torah never suggests this election would shift to a single human or other nation. Even Paul himself says in Romans 11 that God does not change his mind. So how could he claim that God abandoned the Jewish people, right? The Kabbalistic question would be, why would God create a complex structure of Malchut, temple, kingship, sacrifice, divine service, only to later dismiss it all as a mistake? That would mean that God creates the world, then arbitrarily destroys them. This contradicts the purposelessness of creation. In contrast, Judaism believes that Malchut is meant to rise up, to uplift into Bina, into understanding, meaning that our messy material world is meant to be spiritualized, not discarded. Christianity fell into a critical theological trap, mistaking something that reveals divine energy like Jesus or miracles as being the divine essence itself. But Judaism says just because something holds divinity does not mean it is God. Why did this happen? According to Kabbalah, Gentiles may have chokhmah, wisdom, as we say, chokhmah b'goyim tamin, but they lack the bina, the understanding, the inner discernment. Without bina, they cannot internalize divine ideas without externalizing them, turning divine revelation into idolatry. And so what should remain as a mystical inner truth becomes a literal external symbol, a human turned into God or a statue turned into an idol. Now, our Jewish response is to fix the world, ultimately. A Jew sees a broken world and says, let's fix it. Not let's escape to a monastery, not let's declare that the Messiah has already come and the world is fixed, but rather there is still work to be done. That is our mission. That is the heart of Judaism. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one. Even when the world seems fragmented, we affirm everything is part of the divine unity and our job is to raise it up. Christianity theology was created by brilliant minds who understood the Jewish tradition deeply, but they fell into a trap of rejecting the brokenness of the world instead of healing it. Judaism teaches just because the world is damaged doesn't mean it's unholy. The presence of evil or destruction doesn't negate God. It calls us into action. The ultimate heresy is to see the world's imperfection and conclude God abandoned it. Let's start over. The ultimate faith is to see the world's brokenness and say, let's fix it, uplift it, and find the hidden divine within it. The end.
So I have to say that's Chazi's individual belief.
My individual belief, but yes, this is not, well, I don't know how ready. I mean, no, it's not readily available. You're only going to learn that if you learn about the seven heavens, and you only learn that if you learn the Talmud, and then you have to extrapolate from that.
Like, this isn't like you're not reading something that's like widely in Jewish, like vast majority of Jews are not privy to Chazi's thoughts about 2 Corinthians.
That is true. However, my thoughts, they're not my own, as in I'm understanding this from my teachers as well.
Okay.
So what was the fourth heaven again?
I'm sorry?
What was the fourth heaven?
The fourth heaven is Zvul, the dwelling place. And again, the claim is Paul is talking about third heaven, right? Where is this concept coming from? So if we're saying he's a student of Rav Gamliel and he's in this milieu or he's aware of this, then he must know about the other heavens. And then the question is, why is he not discussing them? Why is he not talking about them?
Yeah, that's why I want to understand what the fourth heaven is, like, because you were saying how it's theologically significant that he only reached the third heaven and not higher.
That's my claim over here. My claim is it's significant because what the fourth heaven means was purposely changed. There's a quote. Let me try to find it for a second.
We're going to talk about the idea that Paul was a secret agent.
No. I'm not going to bring in the Rav Emden theory, the spy theory. It's not only Paul; it's Paul and Jesus. But okay, give me 1 second.
But what's the fourth heaven?
I'm sorry?
What's the fourth heaven?
Zvul, the dwelling place. The dwelling place is supposed to be heavenly Jerusalem, the heavenly temple, the altar, right? So that idea gets replaced. Now, there is a rabbi, which I mentioned, I think, in the chat, named Ben Amuzag. Let's see if I can find this quote of his.
If anything, I think Paul not reaching like the quote unquote final destination would align with what you were saying about how the world, even though it isn't perfect, there's still a lot to do and a lot to change, and how there's like still good, I guess, like encoded in the world. And I think we Christians would wholeheartedly agree with that as well. And like Paul was never like quote unquote done. Like he was always like, going about and doing good in the world up until his martyrdom.
I'm not saying Christians don't do good, of course. Christians do great stuff. Yeah. Christians continue to do great things in the world. The question is, like, again, if all roads lead to Jesus at the end, and that he is the Redeemer, and this goes back to the conversation that Jacob often mentions and many Jews mention, which is like, if he is indeed the Messiah, right? I'm looking at the world around me, and I'm not seeing what I'm supposed to be seeing. That is obviously an issue. I'm gonna try to translate this quote. Okay. The fundamental principles of Judaism are found in the secrets of Kabbalah, and they they compare and contrast with some of the secret understandings that were with the ancient priests of the ancient world, Egypt, Greece, Persia, and India. Right? It says that Egypt is, and I speak often how Egypt is the closest nation to holiness. So there's an idea that, again, there are truths and there are secrets over here. The question is, how are these things being interpreted? And this is always our conversation, and I believe this is exemplified at best with Jacob when he's talking to Father Stephen DeYoung, which is we both can't be Israel, and that's why we must meet each other and speak and understand these ideas, right? So my perspective on the seventh heaven, the Jewish perspective on the seventh heaven, it behooves Christians to take time to read and understand these things. I would even say that there were Jewish rabbis that met with priests and monks and went to learn with them in the church as well to better understand what they were trying to say about the New Testament. But there's been sort of like 2,000 years, and I understand there's many reasons for this, not just anti-Semitism, of course, but like of a separation where, that's what you see a video right now about Kabbalah. You ask yourself, like, at no point did you want, like, you have access to Zevi Slavin through not Jonathan Haidt, through John Vervaeke. Why would you have a conversation about Kabbalah, and would you not bring in like the Jewish perspective about that? Someone that has been like deeply involved in that tradition. So only
because Zevi is a perennialist, and like me, thinks the idea of perennialism disqualifies you from having a true ecumenical discussion.
Even if it's not ecumenical, even if it's just informational, like even if you just want to better understand.
No, it's not a better understanding when you're talking to a perennialist. When you're talking to a perennialist, you're talking to somebody who has no filter. It is completely different when you're talking. There's a reason why I don't like talking to perennialist Christians. There's no point. They don't actually believe in Christianity. They're perennialists.
Mm-hmm. But anyways, I hope you didn't take any. I hope I wasn't offensive in any way, Nick.
I was very, very offended.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Okay, so Space Lord says, I have some questions, but they would be off topic. Yeah, we always stick to the topic on this on these streams. We never ever go off topic. You must only be talking about the topic. That was a joke. Look at the huge head on that dog. Yes, and he gets brambles in his fur constantly, and I am constantly finding brambles. Look how big this bramble is, and it was like basically in his nose almost.
By the way, I just want to just say about the Kabbalah as well, because people were like, Kabbalah ultimately, like Jacob was saying, it's what we receive, right? And it's ultimately goes back to at least what we understand from the Zohar is this is how, because the Zohar basically is commentary on the Bible itself, and we are told that this is how the prophets would have understood these verses and these understandings, right? So you're taking prophetic ideas, and then they're being taught over how you're supposed to learn those things. So that's where it's coming from. Obviously, I just make clear right now, not every person who's a Kabbalist, I know Jacob doesn't like that word, actually knows what he's talking about. And that's true about Jews, and that's true about Orthodox Jews as well. And that's also true about myself. I do not claim to have the secrets or the knowledge. However, I focus on certain teachers and focus on certain avenues that I feel that are trustworthy when they're teaching these things. However, while it's amazing, I'm going to take a step back for a second. There's a tremendous messianic power that is released when a certain individual named Shabtai Tzvi causes a tremendous amount of damage for the Jewish people. However, what he exposed, and through his student Natan Ha'azati, who was also one of the greatest Kabbalists, they heretic nonetheless. They expose a tremendous amount of very powerful Torah that people were very hungry for. However, not in the proper vessel or without the proper tradition, it could create a tremendous amount of devastation. After that horrible experience, you could have thought that we would have just completely pushed that away. However, the Baal Shem Tov, may he be blessed, came and understood that reaching out and understanding these deep truths are where the nation is, and we have to start dealing with this and getting back into it. And obviously there's been a renaissance ever since then, and more people are learning Kabbalah, and I think that's great. However, it gets diluted, it gets misconstrued. It's next thing you know, Madonna's putting it on. So at some point, do I think it's amazing that Madonna wants to connect to Kabbalah? Sure. But in reality,
amazing that she spends thousands of dollars buying Kabbalah water.
Right, Kabbalah water. And she changed her name to Esther, right? It's hidden. Now, there's a truth there, but again, it's not, you're not actually tapping into it. So again,
to answer the Morning Sun, which Kabbalah you recommend, I recommend getting to know your Bible. And that is the best preparation for Kabbalah. If you are learning your Bible, which frankly I would say also requires a certain amount of learning Hebrew and prayer, you can then have a better understanding of the tradition that is the Kabbalah.
But I would say, the book of creation, the book of Enoch, the Zohar, Heichalot, that's like, I would say, like, closer. Those are like main texts. Just like Jacob is saying over here, let's say Rabbi Cook, who I'm very fond of. However, when it comes to Kabbalah, and he understands a lot about it, he completely uses terms differently than traditional Kabbalists would use certain terms. So that's like a whole other lexicon that you have to bring on to understand how he's using those terms. Again, it's not out of school. What he's doing is just learning that kind of Kabbalah. You could find yourself very confused if you're comparing that to other teachers. But I would say, because it's not a secret anymore, by the way, it's obviously that it's not only for Jews. Correct. It's not only for Jews. We see, and we've spoken about this often, a hint to this already, that the gifts that Abraham gave to the concubine's children, he gave them secrets and mystical traditions. And obviously we want us all to converge. It would be great if all the world knew this wisdom and knew this Torah. The Jewish people themselves are not ready to be that vessel to fully accept it, unfortunately. The world is not there yet, but when we can, of course, the Torah is to be spread from Jerusalem and shared to all the world. Obviously, that's what we want. We're not trying to hold secrets for ourselves, and we're like, doing this little hand motion and laughing on the side. But the secret of the Zohar ultimately is, if you read the Zohar, you'll see 3 or 4 different coherent understandings, different interpretations. Each one within their own lane is coherent. They may contradict each other. People would like to look at that and say, like, you see, it's fake. Different authors, people wrote it together. The idea is, even if there's an element of truth to that, the idea is to hold the complexity. The gift of Judaism, beside monotheism, which is not even fully our claim because that idea already existed before Judaism, is the unification of the opposites, is be able to hold all these things together. That is the gift. That is what we're trying to do. And the Zohar ultimately is teaching you that all these perspectives, right? We're all the blind man touching the elephant. You have to give yourself multiple eyes to be able to see the full picture.
Just to, this is off topic, but it's not. Western civilization is being intentionally destroyed right now, and the talking heads who are still part of the system but pretend to be against it are pointing at Jews. And if you look into it, there are a lot of Jews in very powerful places, so their theories seem to hold true. who would you guys, as practicing Jews, say the architects of the end of Western Civ are? First, I have to say that not being materialists, to the degree that there is intentionality among the destroyers, I would attribute it to Satan, not to individuals. And are there many people who are, in fact, unknowingly being, not unknowingly or even knowingly, being enrolled in Satan's plans? Yes, but ultimately also as people of faith, and I think Christians of faith would agree with this, we believe that there is one creator of the universe who will defeat them all, and the correct response to the mashchitz, that which is there to destroy, is to turn towards God. And what you will find among all the conspirators who look for a Jew to blame is they are not actually looking towards God and looking towards their sins and looking towards improving the world. They're looking to destroy, and generally they're very obviously filled with hate. So, yeah.
I would just also mention that the Maharal talks about this, how Jews are outside of time. And by that I mean, like, we're the people that's touched eternity, and like that's why we're still here. And that is, it's a black swan within all the white swans. It's too infuriating for the world to see. You either join it or you reject it. What gives me a tremendous amount of inspiration in the last few years was the growing community of the Noahides. There's actually just a video posted about this by Rabbi Skobek. I don't know if you saw that, Jacob.
I posted it to my channel.
It almost made me cry just to see, like, there's the other side of the stuff. But again, anti-Semitism, and I go back to Nick Fuentes again. That's the kind of anti-Semitism that I'm looking for, which is unabashful, clear. It's almost love, and that's hard. It really it's a claim that makes sense in my eyes. And definitely this relates to Jacob's disappointment in the state of Israel, not the nation of Israel, the state of Israel, which is, if you're going to make claims like this about being a Jewish state, then be the Jewish state, be amazing, but you fall completely short of that. And that is, according to Jacob, obviously devastating also on a spiritual level. But regardless, I think the world looks at that and says, where is he? And you can see this in the Gaza and all the claims that's going on. If you're so moral, if you're like the double standard, all of this, the figure, and this is controversial. We spoke about it in the past. You could either be Judas, or you could be Jesus. There's nothing in between for the Jew. There isn't just a regular walking around Jew that's a nice guy. And until we manifest as the redeemed people that we are, it creates a tremendous amount of tension. And then you could extrapolate that into, they're communists, they're crazy capitalists, all the classic complaints you have.
I want to address this from Lego. This is really interesting. I'm seeing a very strong contrast between the Philokalia and Kabbalah, and then you make the opposite contrast to what actually exists. The Philokalia is just spiritual recommendations for living, then God reveals to the humble. It seems the way Chezi describes it, it's much more of a mental knowingness, similar to how Catholics began to understand their faith, not about repentance, but spiritual power. See, this is the difference, because the Philokalia is a book, and the Kabbalah is a tradition. It's not like, I didn't make a contrast between the Zohar and the Philokalia, because that also wouldn't work. The fact is, the idea that the Kabbalah is any one work, right? That you can go and read a translation of the Zohar, for God's sakes, is just a complete misunderstanding of what it means to be a mekubal, to be someone who receives. And that's what mekubal means he who has received. And so, to the degree that your distinction holds true, it is the philokalia, which is more of a manual to spirituality as opposed to the practice of theosis. So, yeah. So, the state of Israel you wouldn't consider Jewish? No, I do not. And frankly, I'm kind of happy Chezi left the room for a minute, because unfortunately this discussion gets kind of heated around here, because while I love Chezi, he is a rabid Zionist who has very strange beliefs. You can be Jesus, Judas, or New York Times milquetoast secular agnostic liberal. Yeah. You can't be a faithful Jew, though, who's also not perfect in any way. And the architects of the fall of Western civilization would be people working for Satan, intentional or not. I mean, I would say the architect of the fall of anything is the mashchit, is that which destroys, which is the spirit. It has its spiritual roots in Satan.
There is this conversation between this rabbi named Sefi Geltzer, who's very much in Money 2, Rav Kook, Rav Shirky, very much in my milieu, and he had this podcast debate with this Catholic priest in Israel. Very nice, very respectful, and this is just going to what we were talking about, Nick. I just want to let you know his response. Where what I was saying over here was said, like, you know, that you guys replaced Jesus with Israel with Jesus, and like serious claims. So the response of the priest was, he acknowledged that Christianity, you know, lacks a very deep understanding of Judaism. He sees the value of Jewish wisdom. He obviously still maintains that Jesus is central and there'll be a future fulfillment, right? A second coming. He emphasizes, though, that the dialogue is about understanding, not conversion, which is like a huge, huge statement, right? We're not looking to convert each other right now. We're looking to better understand each other. And how many Christians still struggle to understand these changes. These changes meaning 1948, what's been going on. It's a very, very intense conversation. Well, it's not actually an intense conversation. It's a very real conversation. And I get you get to see a lot of that here. And you're participating in that, Nick, right now. And I want to just be very clear. When I say you're participating in that, in no way do I mean, and I don't think Jacob would mean this as well, which is like, abandon that right now, stop going to church. No, keep on going to church, keep on doing your things, keep on loving the world. But for you even to better understand your relationship, I think it's very important that we who believe in the God of Israel, or the master of the universe, we must be able to converse and talk and ask. So I think it's amazing. While it could be scary, we're only coming, you know, there was a big separation between these Jewish sects, right? Christianity starts off as a Jewish sect, and as things get more complicated, eventually there's a split, and then history did its thing. But what we're now participating in is actually bringing it back closer to the study hall, back closer to when the Christians, well, not the Christians, but the Jewish Christians at the time were still inside the study hall and still having that conversation. And we haven't got there in the prayer stream yet, but there's the 19th blessing, which talks about our relationship with the heretics and the Christians. And it was a very controversial blessing as well. However, that could that could be reformed, right? As like, again, Jacob, I'll give you an example. When the priest says a line like, dialogue is about understanding, not conversion, right? I didn't say that's the answer. I'm saying more of that language, more of the language where Jews could feel like now comfortable that they're not being evangelized to, then there could be a discussion again that we see ourselves as study partners in the base in the study hall and not being forced to do something. But again, those are vague.
So Rabbi Skobach has said this many, many times, and I keep on referring to it, and I think it's important. I don't believe what is generally the Christian belief, which is that the Jews were, certainly that Pharisaic Jews were persecuting the early Christians. I don't believe that they were kicked out in any way. I think that a lot of that perception is, I mean, if you look at a secular understanding of what happened with Paul and James, that was intra-Christian understandings, and it wasn't the broader Jewish community which persecuted or threw out the Jewish Christians as much as it was the Gentile Christians who ended up throwing out the Jewish Christians, which led eventually to most of the Jewish Christians recognizing Christianity isn't true. And like, I believe, like Rabbi Skobach has said, that we may be looking at a time when we are once again going to have Orthodox Jews who believe Jesus will be the Messiah in a very similar way to possibly early Christians, who we will have to again allow into our synagogues. And we are not prepared for that.
I just on that note, Jacob, I would point out, which is something that's very painful, I'm sure, for me and Jacob. I don't know if some of you saw in the news something that was very, very.
I was wondering if you were going to talk about that.
But yeah. I want to explain the context, because I don't think it's a Christian-hating soldier running around like mad at Christians every second. You have to also understand, most Jews in Israel don't even see a cross that size with Jesus on it in their life. Like they're not in a church. They don't see that. Now, this shows the lack of still understanding in our own community, where there's a tremendous amount of fear and trauma from the Christians. And a lot of, what's the word I'm looking for?
Let's not psychoanalyze somebody who we have yet to actually see.
I'm saying
this guy is going to be court-martialed. I'm hoping it will be a public court-martial, and we will hopefully know very clearly what led him to do his actions. What I made clear in Father Eric's stream, and what Yosef made clear on the Discord, and what I think we need to emphasize is there is no one that any of us, as far as I know, would think of as a genuine rabbi who would condone the type of behavior that, like, and it's not a matter of like, oh, it would be bad if the Gentiles knew what we secretly believe, and politically we don't want to cause a fight. Like, his behavior is not halachic behavior. That is not how someone who believes in Orthodox Judaism behaves.
So I completely agree with that. That word I was looking for, there's still a lot of ignorance. Like a lot of the things we talk about here with with the Noahides and being very open with our Christian brothers and sisters. Again, this is something that's still quite novel for the Jewish population. While again, there's always versions of that happening on the fringes. That hasn't happened, and again, that leads to something horrible like that. Very, very, very extremely uncommon. Like I can't tell you the last time I heard of something like that in Israel. Again, that also has to do with the fact that like Jews are not like Israeli soldiers are never raiding a church. Right? Like, we don't have interactions like that. There's no such thing where like you would even have that kind of interaction. But yes, it's horrible that happened, and I want to mention that. I did want to mention also
real quick though, there have been a lot of churches that have been bombed by the Israeli government.
Bombed? See, that's the thing. It's like, and I hate the fact people make me defend the Israeli government, but I end up going to their defenses despite. The fact is that if the IDF is careful about anything, it's about Christian holy sensibilities far more, and than they are even the lives of human beings, because it is an existential danger to the state of Israel for Christians to believe that they are in any way being targeted or being insulted by Israel.
Jacob did a whole reading also about Pizza Bella and his whole interaction.
Yeah.
And dealing with like I'm saying, that's a real thing. It's not to say that obviously mistakes still happen, but I would put good money down that there's no way that if it did hit a church, assuming it wasn't also some sort of weapons depot or things like that, then it's unintentional.
And even if it weren't a weapons depot, like Israel is trying its damnedest to protect Christian churches, and the fact people don't understand that, like, do I believe there are individual Israeli soldiers who may have targeted Christians / churches? Sure, because I believe there are stupid people in every army. It doesn't make any sense that the types of shit that Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens say, and frankly, I didn't listen to Father Josiah Trenum speak with Tucker Carlson because I've already heard him say too many things, which made me think, okay, this is somebody who is the pastor of a Arabic Christian community who himself doesn't speak Arabic, and that's why he so misunderstands things. But yeah, I mean, the idea that there is something in Judaism which is inherently antagonistic to Christianity, like I was thinking about it this morning. You know, after World War II, there were a lot of yeshivas in China, and they, like, Shanghai was filled with Orthodox Jews briefly during World War II, and they had to decide if they were going to stay in China or go to India or come to the United States, etc. And the general consensus was to come to go to Australia or come to the United States, partially because I think this was definitely part of the discussion. Like, Hinduism is actual idolatry. We as Jews do not believe that Christians are actual idolaters. That would change our relationship. And there is a difficulty in engaging with, like, just normal relations with Hindus as Jews that we don't
I would think
Christians.
I would think, and I would think, and I wouldn't even blame you guys for viewing Christians as idolaters, because we think like a human being is God.
Well, see that's the thing. Popularly, there's a lot of Jews. I would say lay Jews far more than anybody who's seriously studied Jewish law would put Christians, and do put Christians in that category. But when I was talking to Jonathan Pageau, what I believe surprised him, I thought when I said it, he seemed surprised, was I was like, we as Jews need to start talking about Jesus more, because we don't at all. And I think there's a lot of belief among Christians that religious Jews spend a lot of time talking about Jesus, and we really don't. We don't talk about Jesus like almost at all, right? In fact, like a lot of people, like, yeah, there is a stricture in Judaism not to mention the names of idols, and a lot of people do apply that to Jesus, which means we don't talk about Jesus at all. And frankly, I think that leads to a lot more ignorance in Judaism than what people imagine the case to be, which is like every Jew has a copy of Toldot Yeshu, which I had a very difficult time finding one, right?
It is
Christians have heard of Toldot Yeshu more than vast majority of Jews have.
It's extremely weird for people in my neighborhood to see that I have like a Quran and like a New Testament like in my bookcase. Like they're always fascinated by that. But well, like what Jacob said, there has been in the last few years major moves with rabbis who are actually, and this relates of course to the Noahide relationship, but also Israel's relationship with evangelicals and donations that we get. Like, how does that relationship actually work? Like, can you be accepting money from Christians? Do you consider them idolaters or not? And that's a real discussion that has to be had. I want to quote another great assist of ours, because someone here asked, here. Does God respond to?
I was just about to. I was like, did we finish this comment? I was going
more than an unlearned man. So I'm going to say something, and then you could jump into it. But I want to just say, as far as all men, I'm going to quote from Maimonides. Not only the tribe of Levi, but any of the inhabitants of the world whose spirit generously motivates him or her, and he understands with the wisdom to set himself aside and to stand before God, to serve him and minister him and to know God, proceeding justly as God made him, removing from his neck the yoke of many reckonings which people seek. He is sanctified as the Holy of Holies. God will be his portion and heritage forever, and he will provide that is sufficient for him in this world, like he provides for the priests and the Levites. And thus David declared, God is the lot of my portion. You are my cup. You support my lot. So that is within our text with one of our heaviest hitters, who is talking about how everyone is welcome to the game.
Yeah, I mean, yes and no. I have to. So how I was going to answer it is, to some degree, you have to say that God has, in fact, blessed some people with a greater capacity to understand, and knowledge of God is the greatest of blessings. So to the degree that someone has da'at Hashem, knowledge of God, and specifically, like we're talking again about da'at, not chokhmah, not bina, but da'at, right? And for someone who understands Jewish spirituality, right? So da'at, knowledge, is the precise word that in Genesis is used to say Adam knew his wife, right? Da'at, and she bore children, right? That is, so it is not a question of mental knowledge. And there are, so here, I'll tell you one of my favorite stories.
Yeah, but Jacob, you're
yeah.
saying it doesn't have to do with mental knowledge. Nevertheless, Jews are commanded to know God, right? Which means everything in all his ways, even in mental knowledge, even in
Correct.
science.
The mental knowledge is a part of it at the same time. So let me tell you one of my favorite stories. This is a Baal Shem Tov story. So the story goes that the Baal Shem Tov had gone to a village, and there was a simple man who lived in the village who was only able to read Hebrew, but he didn't understand it. And he went to the Baal Shem Tov, and he said to the Baal Shem Tov, "Rabbi, I don't understand Hebrew, so I read my prayer book, my Siddur, from beginning to end every day. Could you tell me which prayers I should say when?" And the story goes that the Baal Shem Tov took either colored pieces of paper or colored strings and put bookmarks in this man's prayer book, and to tell him this is where the morning prayers are, this is where the afternoon prayers are, this is where the Sabbath prayers are, right? So that he would know where to look in his prayer book. And when he finished, the Baal Shem Tov went his way, and this man went the other way, and a strong wind came and blew the prayer book out of his hand, and all of the colored paper blew out of the prayer book. And the man gathered up the colored pieces of paper, and he turned back to go find the Baal Shem Tov. And the Baal Shem Tov had already made his way for some bits, as was his custom, to go into the forest and pray. And so this man tried to catch up to the Baal Shem Tov, but the Baal Shem Tov was going very fast. And the Baal Shem Tov gets to a cliff, and the man thinks he's going to catch up to the Baal Shem Tov, but the Baal Shem Tov takes out a handkerchief, and he jumps, and slowly he floats down to the ground below. So the man does the same thing. He takes out his handkerchief, and he also jumps, and he slowly falls to the ground below. And the Baal Shem Tov gets to a stream, and he takes out his handkerchief, and he drops it onto the water, and steps onto the handkerchief and floats across the stream. So the man does the same thing. He takes out his handkerchief, he drops it onto the water, he steps on it, and he floats across the stream. And finally, the Baal Shem Tov gets to the clearing where he was going to pray, and the man catches up to him. And he explains to the Baal Shem Tov that a strong wind came and blew his prayer book open, and all the colored pieces of string or paper fell out. And he asked the Baal Shem Tov to put the colored pieces of paper back into the prayer book. So the Baal Shem Tov asked him, "How did you follow me here?" The man said, "I saw what you did, and I just followed. I did exactly what you did." And the Baal Shem Tov told him, "It's okay. You pray as you've been praying." So that's a very characteristic story of the Baal Shem Tov. There is this idea that the simple person who genuinely desires God, loves God. And I'll tell a story, a true story about somebody in this community. People know who he is. But he told me that he bought tzitzits because he was trying to follow the Bible. So the fringes that we as Jews wear. And I have to say, there are many Jews who don't like wearing tzitzits. but they wear it because they have to. They feel they have to, or they feel ashamed, or it's a cultural thing, right? And they don't want to, but they do. And this man, he's not Jewish, he's a Noahide. And an Orthodox Jew told him that he shouldn't be wearing his tzitzit. And honestly, it brings me to tears to think about this. He carries the tzitzit in the glove box of his car. That is a love of mitzvot. That is a love of the Torah, which goes far, far beyond any intellectual understanding. That, like, he's living Torah. Or, you know, I tell rabbis I talk to about Noachides about this. Jess cries when he thinks about the book of Job. He loves the book of Job so much he starts crying. That is a love of Torah that I wish I had.
Imagine how happy Jess is going to be when 120 gets to actually meet Job.
If there's such a person as Job. Yes.
If there's such a person as Job, sure.
If there is such a person as Job. So
I don't know if you want to touch on this or just reference a different stream.
No, we should, but there's so many comments. We're not going to get all the comments. I mean, we could talk about Birkat Hamini. Okay, we'll touch on this, but for the other questions, it would be nice if people would jump on and we could actually have a discussion, because it gets weird answering questions on stream.
Well, before you jump into the note, I want to ask Nicholas over here. Is it actually Nicholas?
Only when I'm in trouble.
I have that too. My parents say my full 3-name name.
Yehezkel Shraga Halevi.
Come down here right now. Not anymore. When I was younger. My daughter's upset because she's Amalia Navarose and she decides to add Bat Levi. I was like, sure, you could do that. You could let people know that you're a daughter of a Levite. But I was going to ask you, Nick, which is what is your as a Christian on streams like this, what does this feel like to you?
I mean, similar to the priest and rabbi situation that you were describing earlier, just wanting to know more about, Judaism, because obviously like Christianity stems from there. And yeah, just want to know truth, just after truth.
Mm-hmm.
So
you said it. Sorry, go ahead, Jacob.
To explain the Noahide thing, first of all, I have to say, if you go on my channel and you look in the section where I post comments, there's a link to Rabbi Skobak's recent lecture about the history of the Noahide movement. And certainly for Jews, it's a beautiful history. But to understand what the Noahide movement is, it wasn't Paul on Emmaus, it was Paul at Damascus, but whatever, it's all good. So Judaism has long had, and this is something that clearly existed before Jesus, an idea that there is a relationship that Gentiles as Gentiles have with the God of Israel. There's a proper orientation that a Gentile can and should have with the God of Israel.
Pause. Famously seen in the story of Naaman in the Bible.
Naaman is a great example. Yeah, you want to find the chapter? That's
Naaman. The king gets leprosy. He wants to take care of it. It also shows how they're not aware. The whole population is not aware even to sort of speak to the prophet.
It's 2 Kings 5 if you want to read it. Naaman or Naaman, right? Go. I highly recommend I recommend everybody read 2 Kings 5, but certainly someone who wants to understand how we as Jews view the role of Gentiles in relation to God, 2 Kings 5 is definitely a good place to start.
I would just, one second, Jacob, I would just say, I want to just read that line, which is very important. He takes care of this. He takes care of his leprosy. He goes in, he bathes in the Jordan.
I mean, ZDMC is not wrong. Naaman gets a hall pass to go back into the false god temple after.
Correct. But that relates. I mean, that's a key element in the Noahide understanding.
Right. And yes, the Noahide laws, as we understand them, are clearly present in the first 9 chapters of Genesis.
And he says it here. But my God, pardon your servant for this. When my master enters the temple of Rimmon to bow low and worship there, and he is leaning on my arm, so I must bow low in the temple of Rimmon. When I bow low in the temple of Rimmon, may God pardon your servant for this. And Elisha tells him, and he said to him, go in peace. Okay, and the understanding is, you understand, Naaman, what's going on in the up and up. And as long as your understanding is who these prayers are ultimately focused to, then as a non-Jew, the demand for the strict monotheism is not required.
Like I said, first 9 chapters of Genesis, you see quite clearly all of the 7 categories of laws we believe Gentiles are required to live by are clearly stated in the first 9 chapters of Genesis.
Clearly, you have to find some of them out.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty clear. Like,
okay. Yeah.
I mean, if you're reading the first 9 chapters of Genesis, you can clearly see that there are laws which God is demanding of people who are not Israelites, that they live by all 9. I mean, the one that people find most weird is actually the one that's the most explicit. Like, it's right there in Genesis chapter 9. And I have to say, Father Stephen boldly says Christianity is Noahide Judaism. He believes that Eastern Orthodox are, it doesn't say, and God said to Noah, thou shalt, except for actually you could say the establishment of courts and Ever Minachai, to not eat of a live animal. Those are explicit. The other ones are not explicit, but they're obviously there, I would say. ChatGPT is wrong. Go ahead and read the first 9 chapters of Genesis, and it's right there. I think Naaman, who knows the true God, and he just has a duty and wants God to know, I am faking this false worship, but just know where my heart is. And I have to say, this is my recommendation generally to to people who want to be Noahides, because we are not, as Jews, unfortunately, equipped to take in the Noahide community yet. There are several people who have or do go to Eastern Orthodox churches, not because they believe the priest who is there is a priest, but because they believe that I, as a Orthodox Jew, to the degree that I sometimes pretend to be an Orthodox Jew, am a priest of the true God. And
just to answer, you could find many of them in Genesis 9 verses 1 through 7, and then there are other, it's being alluded to again in Genesis 15, 19, Leviticus 24, 24, and then you have also in Exodus in Exodus 20, and in Genesis 9, and in Jeremiah 3. There are different places where, and obviously you have the Talmud and the Gemara talking about it as well, but there are different verses that you could understand it from.
So here, let's just read Genesis 9. And God blessed Noah and his sons and said to them, be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth. And I would say frankly, I think that's pretty explicit. This is the laws of sexual morality. And the fear of you and the dread of you shall be upon every beast of the earth and upon every bird of the air, upon all that moves upon the earth, and upon all the fishes of the sea. Into your hand they are they delivered. Every moving thing that lives shall be food to you, even as the green herb have I given you all things. But flesh with its life, what?
Go on.
Yeah. But flesh with its life, which is its blood, you shall not eat. This is the prohibition that out of the Noahide laws that people find the most weird. It's the least weird. It's the one that's most clearly said, right? And surely your blood of your lives will I require. At the hand of every beast will I require it. And at the hand of man, at the hand of every man's brother will I require the life of man. Whoso sheds man's blood by man shall his blood be shed. For in the image of God made he man, which is A, not murder, and B, establishing court of justices. So the 7 Noahide laws are to not curse God, to not murder, no sexual immorality,
no theft,
not
eating a limb of a living animal,
establishing courts, and
that's all 7, correct?
The first 2 are to not curse God and not to worship idols, I think. Is that it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I ended up but yeah, and you can find them in Acts 15 as well. Also, you can find them in the book of Jubilees. So yeah, it's pretty clear if you know what you're talking about. Like, why would you need Noahide laws if Jesus was crucified for everyone's sins?
Oh, 1 second. I wasn't aware of that. 1 second. Okay. According to the Talmud, the 6 were given to Adam. Only eating a limb of a living animal was to Noah post flood. But that's Talmud.
Yeah. And ZDMC has the Acts 15.
1 second. We have a guest over here.
Hello, Olson. How are you doing?
Good. Sleepy. My dog woke me up, and then I jumped on the YouTubes to fall back asleep, and I saw you guys going, and then I was listening, and so we were having that conversation. Yeah, I was asking those questions, and you said, well, you wouldn't answer them unless I jumped on, so here I am. Don't tell my wife, she'll kill me that I'm not sleeping right now. Right.
So you say you're fuzzy about the term Noahide.
Yeah, well, and I think that question stemmed from the one of like, do Jews view Christians as idolaters? And I kind of always assumed that was so. I didn't assume that Jews think of Jesus all the time or talk of Jesus. In fact, I assume Jews don't talk about Jesus hardly at all. Like, why would they? Like, that doesn't make sense. So,
So to clarify, there's definitely, I mean, I would say if you take a poll among Jews, they would say, oh, sure, Christians are idolaters. When it comes to actual Jewish law and categorizing people and things, right? Someone who's actually studied Jewish law recognizes the famous discussion around the Talmud being, how do we have business partners who are Christians if we might in some way elicit them, like if Christianity is idolatry, I can't encourage idolatry, I can't enable idolatry, right? So certainly I wouldn't be able to tell Christians, hey, you should go to church. And I even, like, the strictures would be so strict. For example, the Mishnah says 3 days before a idolatrous holiday and 3 days after, you cannot transact with an idolater. Well, if Sundays are a idolatrous holiday, then I can't have transactions with Christians at all.
By the way, that's an internal distinction that we would have to know. Then there's an external one, which is how do Gentiles have a place in the world to come? Another discussion in the Talmud as well, right? Because even if I somehow made him kosher for me to interact with, that just means that I could interact with him. That's level one. Now, who is this person? Where is he going? What is his destiny?
Right. So, and the idea that a majority of humanity is going to hell is inherently repugnant to Judaism. Like that, we would say that is a blasphemous idea.
I'd also mention that the reason the vast majority of Jews, even learned Jews, by the way, would their knee-jerk reaction would be to categorize Christianity as idolatry is also because getting into the nuance of Noahides and joint worship, these are real halachic terms that no one focused on for thousands of years because there was no need to really focus on them. It just wasn't a discussion. And hence it wasn't forgotten. It was just no one is aware of those. You had elements that were censored also. And
also you have to realize vast majority of Jews would not be able to, if they saw a Talmud in a bookcase, they wouldn't know what it is, right?
Unfortunately, that's true today.
Yeah. So like, it's not like most Jews are very well versed in Jewish law.
Like a million.
Right? But I mean, a real debate within Orthodox Judaism is, what do we do with the Hindus, right? Do we consider Hindus idolaters?
And
right?
There too, there's a dispute. There are rabbis that will come and say,
like, this is where we're holding at, is like, can we say a majority of people in India are actual idolaters? Well, not really. Like, it's hard to say that.
And would I prefer? Is there a hierarchy within that as well? As in, would I prefer the Hindu become Christian? And I would prefer, would I prefer the Christian?
That's where the boundaries of the halachic discussion are, right? It's like, how do we deal with Hindus as idolaters, right?
Specifically, because we know they must have a place in the world to come, right? Like, because
they must have like billions of people going to hell. That's not it. Like that's already a Jewish, like, no, that doesn't work, right? And wow, Gilad, ma shlomcha?
Hi. Well, I'm okay. Having some mild migraines. So
Ooh,
and,
The
that's not
worst.
good.
yeah, but yeah, it's okay. Just thought I
Refresh lema.
thank you. I mean, it's chronic, so it's not. It's not going.
Then definitely you should have a refresh lema.
All right.
Refresh lema means a full healing.
I'm
It's not
interested
severe.
in what Gilad wanted to, because this is usually like less the topic you jump in on. So tell us
Yeah.
what was ringing in your ear.
Just when you were discussing Hindu, there was something regarding like an argument between like there was like this the notion like in atheism you heard Ricky Gervais say like this one more God argument where he says okay like yeah, I don't believe in God, and they say how can you not believe in God, and he said like you don't believe in Zeus, you don't believe in Athena, so
There's
like
just one more I don't believe in.
yeah, and there's just one more, and he said like that's Alex O'Connor made I think a nice argument about it, like two things. He said one, it's like if someone told like if you're an orphan and you have theories about who your father is, and you go like okay, so maybe my father is Mexican, maybe my father is Portuguese, and then one guy said maybe we don't have a father. And he says, like, no, that's a different, like it's not just one more like father theory, right? Like it's not like I don't believe in the Mexican father theory. So it's like there is a fallacy there. But the other thing is, like with what's the polytheistic is the word I'm looking with polytheistic religions. It's like we tend to think, oh, they believe in like multitude rather than oneness, but there's also like Brahman, right? Like there's the oneness always appears there like in a real way. So it's kind of I don't know.
I
mean, we don't need to get into the specifics of Hinduism, but to make clear, the debate within Judaism isn't are Christians idolaters or not. It's are Hindus idolaters or not?
Well, but just to the point that Gilad said, though, because what you need, what's essential for that category is the joint worship. Now, we believe, I mean, let's say Rav Melamed believes, like Gilad was saying, that ultimately it all goes to Brahman, and that's why, like, even though there's all these different gods, the source is still one. And that's why, as far as Jews are considered, it's considered idolatry for a Jew, but not idolatry for the non-Jew. And the same thing goes to, and this was what we were getting to about Jesus. Someone like a well-versed Christian that's deep into the Trinity, he himself might be an idolater. But most Christians, that is not their conception of the Trinity. And that's why they're mostly considered, forget Unitarians, that's obviously that's much less of an issue. But yeah, so like Gilad was saying in Brahman, ultimately goes to one, then that allows you to expand your circle tremendously.
So who would be considered idolaters?
Honestly, so certainly, like we would say, the people who 2,000 years ago, the Romans who had Venus and whatever, and their conception of the world was with these feuding gods, that there wasn't a creator of the universe, that and like honestly, like I would almost want to say the idolaters are the people that God wiped out himself, right, in the Bible, right.
But
I limit it to that. Go ahead, Gilad.
But isn't something like King Xerxes, who was considered to be like a god king, like total idolatry?
Maybe, but ultimately, like, and this gets into the whole thing, like, so we had a discussion on the Discord, which very understandably, a lot of Christians were like, well, why are Jews so opposed to what that soldier did, right? Which we are. Like, halakhically, that was completely impermissible what he did, right? And one of the things that I pointed out is like, we don't believe in fighting for God's honor in that manner, right? It's like God knows if somebody's an idolater. He knows their heart. It's not even like a consideration. Our consideration really, when it comes to halakhic, like Jewish law, it's like, am I contributing to something that could be poisoning this person's soul, right? That is a prohibition that we have, right? So if I am if I am in some way enabling something that is prohibited to this Gentile, right? That literally the prohibition, this out of the 613 commandments, the prohibition we discuss in this manner the most is lifnei iver, which is you shall not place a stumbling block before the blind, right? The Bible says you shall not place a stumbling, and we understand that to be more than just literally a blind person. We believe you should not cause another human being to stumble in a way that they don't understand. And the question is, if I encourage you to go to church, am I placing a stumbling block before the blind, right?
I wanted to say
that is the essence of the debate in the Talmud and in the halachic works.
What is mentioned here in the comment is correct. Solomon got into a lot of trouble for that. Solomon was being the smartest of all men. I'm sure he, at his understanding, knew the unification is all one. Really, this means one. I'm trying to create peace over here. But the people were not ready for that. The people were not ready to have suddenly idolatry in the temple because Solomon already understood that, it will be a house of prayer for all nations, and really we're all talking about one. Now, in 2026, we could start having a conversation which is more nuanced about this. But back then, that was obviously way, way too confusing for people. And we're told that is one of the sins of Solomon.
And Lego, like 100%, you're hitting on the reason why the Jewish discussion becomes like, are we contributing to something we shouldn't? Like, God gets to decide who goes to heaven and who goes to hell, and it's none of my business, right? And I can quote it because Jesus quoted it from like the Talmudic corpus. It's not in the Bible. I used to not say this to Christians because I figured it's not in my Bible, but I didn't know it's in their Bible. Jesus says, be careful how you judge, because by the measure that you measure, you will be measured, right? This is a very Talmudic saying, right? And so we tend to try to be very careful about saying people go to hell, right? Like,
there's a verse.
Yeah.
There's a verse in Kings 2:17. Those nations worship the Lord, but they also serve their idols. To this day, their children and their children's children do so as their ancestors did. Right? Again, there's an understanding and there's a rule.
What's the actual verse so they can look it up?
Kings 2.
2 Kings.
2 Kings 17.
17 what?
Malachim bet Yud Zayin. Oh, what pasuk?
Yeah.
1 second.
He's giving you a whole chapter. I guess you could go to the whole chapter. How are you doing, Sandy?
What are you talking about? He gave me the chapter. Yeah.
Let me give you the exact verse.
Just one question while he's looking. when you were discussing the perception of the stumbling block in front of the blind and everything, I thought it might also have something to do with the story of Plamo from the Talmud. Haman yetapel barashein, chet b'nei Satan. You know this one? So there's the story
As he
of
probably does.
Oh, it's like I'm distracted right now.
Yeah.
Trying to find this verse. What's Mem Aleph again in English?
41.
41. Verse 41.
Okay. You wanted them to read 40 whole verses before they got to it? These are Christians. They don't read whole chapters of the Bible. Be serious.
Sorry, go ahead, Gilad.
Pretty sure Boost Till's Bible study is a whole chapter at a time.
So I was thinking about like whether the notion from the story of Plamo with the chet b'nei Satan.
Plamo?
Yeah, Plamo. So the story is about this Plamo who would always say, "Damned be the wicked," or "Chetz b'nei Satan."
Yeah.
And
And
like,
this like Yom Kippur.
yes, on Yom Kippur you have the poor man at the door, and he's like, "I'm so righteous, I will bring you into my house." And then the poor man like misbehaves, and he says like, "Behave properly," and then the poor man dies, and everyone is saying like how Plamo murdered this man or killed this man. Like you can translate it differently, and then he runs away and he hides in the toilet and he's crying out to God, and he's basically told like, "Why were you saying all your life Chetz b'nei Satan," or like "Damned be the wicked"? And he says like, "What should have I been saying?" And he's told, the merciful, or God, God the merciful shall tend to the wicked. Like this isn't your job to fight all the wickedness in the world.
My guess is the reason I haven't heard that particular story is there are many such stories in the Talmud. Yeah.
I have a point of clarification, just like with what you're saying about like if a Christian is deeply versed in the their Trinitarian beliefs and truly believe them, then they are closer to an idolater than just your average. So then in that case, right, PVK, who is deeply versed in the Trinity, like I think you would say
Is he versed in the Trinity?
He tends to not talk about it very often, and he's the quintessential Christian that we say we're not so worried about. He says, "My church believes this is in the creeds, I will therefore believe it. As far as we're concerned, minhag avotam biyadam, that's the term, the traditions of their fathers are in their hands." Someone who believes in something just because that's what their father told them, we kind of don't fault them for that.
As Nachmanides says, for he allotted all the nations constellations in the heavens, and higher above them are the angels of the Supreme, who he placed as lords over them as well, which means the nations of the world also have intermediaries that they are using. It's quite novel, again, at the time, the idea of monotheism. Like you could jump to, again, we see some of that in Egypt already. We see earlier versions of that. It's not only Jews that are bringing this idea up, but there's a famous verse which says, in Hebrew, it says, "Az huchali kro b'shem Hashem." In the days of Enosh, the people started calling out God's name, but in reality, it's not only beginning in the word Hebrew, huchal means also chulal, was desecrated. And that's where different ideas start coming in. There's confusion around, but God is merciful, and God understands that this confusion is there. And this ultimately goes back to what we see ourselves as Jews. We are all, as all humanity, we are all invited into building this beautiful structure, this house of humans. Jews see themselves as the chimney, there to allow for proper ventilation or divine ventilation to go through. So that's the offer. But everyone's in the house, and many times the chimney cleaners are very dirty, needing to participate in this act of cleaning out the chimney as well. But Father, I would also say, I could go even further, and I mentioned this is one of the comments over here, which is there's an idea in Judaism, which is God and its Torah and Israel are one, or sometimes it's just God and Israel are one. That's an idea that I believe was misconstrued by Christians of that kind of Trinity. So then even the ones who, again, in the halachic discussion, Rabbi Malamed goes as far as saying that even someone who has heretical thoughts or idolatrous thoughts, if he didn't actually put inside his house a cross or a thing, like it requires many moves to actually become an idolater, because we assume humans are confused. We don't understand terms fully. Our cognition is limited. So even when I hear Christians talk about when you have like a 7-hour stream about the Trinity, and people end up saying like, listen, it's very hard to understand, we're not sure, then okay, then I guess you're not fully sure, and then I guess you're not fully an idolater then.
I mean, I thought it was like a Jewish understanding that you aren't merely what you intellectually believe, but it's what you practice and do which truly defines you. Like, you're not a Jew just because you're ethnically Jewish. You're a Jew because you keep Sabbath and follow the Torah.
No, because before the Torah, there's a people. Unlike other religions, it's a nation first.
You think Judaism is like an ethnocentric?
Even if I don't keep the commandments, I'm still a Jew.
Jacob,
But you don't see that. You don't see that in the Bible, bro.
Jacob, you're muted.
Sorry. Let's not confuse
Pantomime was great.
together. When it comes down to it, one of the reasons we don't believe that the vast majority of Christians are idolaters is because the vast majority of Christians are good people who don't go around murdering people, who don't go around stealing. So they believe in a creator. And vast majority of Hindus, like, they believe that the world, there's order in the world, etc., right? And so, yes, to some degree, I would say that that's the essence of saying it's not about what's in your head, right? It's about what you are actually enacting in the world.
But then even the Greeks, who you guys would consider idolaters, they were still after virtue and these higher goods.
So whether we can say Plato and Socrates were idolaters, like, that's already like really, so like Maimonides certainly doesn't seem to think Plato was an idolater, right? So like it ultimately, like, we can recede all the way to the point of who were true idolaters, the people in the Bible that God actually killed.
I do have a challenge or a question regarding that, like which I'm not sure about, like, because a lot of Jewish literature, like Maimonides, talk about avodah zarah, and I'm not sure what's the right way to consider that in terms of like, is avodah zarah idolatry per se, or is it more complicated? Because like Maimonides talks about Jews specifically with charms like the. Bye, Hazik.
Bye, guys.
Thank you. We're praying for you and your family.
Thank you.
So with avodah zarah, it's like the way that certain let's say Mizrahi Jews or Sephardic Jews, if you want, like in Israel, have like charms, is considered like or like pictures of like Jewish saints or something or something that Maimonides would certainly consider avodah zarah, at least as far as I know Maimonides, and that's where I'm not like sure how really lenient the Jewish concept about idolatry is, as you're claiming.
Okay, so one of the very important things to recognize is that we, as Jews, hold Jews to a much higher standard than we hold Gentiles. And if you ask somebody like Father Stephen, he would say that that's actually what Paul was trying to explain to Gentiles in his letter to the Romans. Okay?
That's right.
We
where I'm
believe.
sitting.
What?
That's right where I'm sitting. I was going to point out that the last three questions or so, for Christians, they show up in Romans 14. I was thinking of the one holds one day above another, and somebody else holds every day equal. Well, there's a lot more to that chapter. Read Romans 14. Well, not you, Gilad. I mean, you could, but because
yeah, and Chazi, I mean, even that, whether Maimonides truly said Christianity is idolatry, but so this is why I'm bringing up the Mishnah Torah, which is the Maimonides' actual codification of Jewish law, and this is what he says. This is chapter 1 of laws of idolatry. In the days of Enosh, which is what Chazi brought up, this is in Genesis, humans made a great error, and the sages of that generation gave ignorant advice, and Enosh himself was one of those in error. This was their error. They said, since God created these stars and the spheres that guide the world, and placed them in the heights and treat them with honor, and they are the servants that serve before them, it is fitting to praise them and to glorify them and treat them with honor. This is the will of God. Blessed be He, that they make great and honor those whom God had made great and honored, like the kings, like the king who desires to honor those who stand before him, and this is the honor of the king. Since this matter arose in their hearts, they began to build palaces to the stars and to make sacrifices to them, and to praise and glorify them in words, and to bow down before them in order to obtain favor of the Creator. This is the essence of idolatry. So for him, Maimonides, he says Chet Enosh, like this mistake of Enosh, is the essence of idolatry, and so he applies this to Christianity. Most people would say. Generally, I think the majority view is we would say that somebody who is caught up in the sin of Enosh, as opposed to actual idolatry, which is the belief that there are various gods, not that there are lesser things, shituf, as we refer to it, like including other beings in your praise and glory. Like, generally, we make a huge distinction between those two. And generally, we would say that somebody who is making that mistake, which is an obvious mistake, we would not categorize that as idolatry for a Gentile. For a Jew, yes.
All right. Thanks for the clarification. I have to go. See everyone
later.
So then would you say, Jacob, as you were talking about earlier, you said those who are idolaters are those who God killed in the Old Testament, or condemned as idolaters in the Old Testament. So then when you say that there's no clear delineation of idolaters post scripture?
So there is a story in the Talmud which says that the rabbis got together and they decided to destroy the evil inclination for the three capital sins, the three cardinal sins. There are three cardinal sins in Judaism: sexual immorality, murder, and idolatry. And the story in the Talmud goes that they decided to kill the evil inclination, which caused people to be involved in these three sins. The next day, there were no chickens laying eggs and people were not having children. So they decided to resurrect the evil inclination for sexual immorality and just to blind it, whatever that means. And to a very real extent, many Orthodox Jews, I don't say you have to believe this, like it's an agadic piece of the Talmud, but it is a piece of the Talmud that gets quoted a lot by Orthodox Jews. We have a certain belief that after the destruction of the Second Temple, there is a lower propensity that people have for idolatry and murder, certainly, and even for sexual immorality, and that the generations we live in today don't have the same. So we believe in a concept called Yeridat Hadorot, which means the descent of the generations, meaning that each generation is spiritually weaker than the previous. And we believe that with greater spiritual power, there's a greater inclination towards evil and a greater inclination towards good. And what we would say is that a weakness has fallen upon the earth, so that, true, we don't have the great prophets that we did, like Isaiah and Ezekiel, but we also don't have the same level of idolatry and murder and evil in the world as existed during the time of the greater prophets.
It's interesting. Athanasius, in his work on the Incarnation, actually attributes that to Christ. I mean, obviously, him being a Christian, but he notes how like paganism was rampant throughout the ancient world, and then soon after Christ, it basically goes away, and you have all these pagan religions. You have those people converting to Christianity, and basically the only remaining pagan religion, I guess, is like Hinduism today.
So I will point out, ZDMC, that the people who call Jesus blasphemer are the Jews in the Gospel of John, and there is no case in which Lucky, stop, he's in the kitchen. There's no case in which the Gospel of John depicts the Jews as having the correct answer to anything. So, yeah. And yes, Islam did a lot to rid the world of paganism.
So is there a clear, I guess, idea or definition of what constitutes idolatry?
I mean, generally, I think the consensus among rabbis, first of all, is that like knowing what is and isn't idolatry is something that someone like a rabbinic decisor has to spend many years studying to actually know the answer to that. But also that it would hinge on not actually believing in a single creator of the world who rules. Like henotheism certainly for Gentiles, I would say the majority view is that that would not constitute idolatry.
Okay.
So what you were saying with the idea of spiritual, basically with greater spiritual power comes greater responsibility.
Yes.
Kind of the Spider-Man theory of idolatry. So if there was a person who was able to heal, right, who was in touch spiritually with the power to heal others, they would be held at a higher judgment level of idolatry than just your average person.
I would say that would be more a question of, okay, is this magic or is this miraculous healing, right? And what's the difference between magic and miracle? Magic is when you impose your will on God, and miracle is when you impose God's will on the world.
Right, but in either way, right, isn't that person a greater conduit of the spiritual realities?
Likely. Yeah. I mean, would you say a better doctor is more of a conduit for spiritual realities than a worse doctor?
I think it depends on what your clarification of spiritual reality is.
So you're
I
finding
agree.
this an interesting place, Olson, but like Christian churches talk about idolatry a lot. They worry about it in a different way than the Jews do. But I heard, like, I mean, you look at any really good argument going through a church, any good question of denominational or doctrinal adherence. It's all about that line that that Jacob's pointing to with the evil inclination and the good, which is pretty easy to understand if you've ever done or heard people talking about art. The blackest black lines up next to the whitest white. Now from there are gradients, of distinction between the two. So I mean, whether you point to a doctor or somebody in any other field or a good, like a leader in the religion, I think it's pointing at that you always have to be very aware that the more, so say God gives you a gift of healing. Then the question becomes, what do you do? Not just with the gift, but with the realization that God has given you a gift of healing. Then you have to be much more diligent in your relationship with the gift giver, because otherwise, every one of us has that evil inclination, and the immediate danger becomes, you get full of yourself and you step across, out of line. And like, it's not, I love listening to Jacob and Hezi talk about this because it comes from a long tradition of how to talk about these things. Whereas one of the dangers I found in church was that it's very much becoming a bottom-up religion, which means everybody's the best expert on everything, and a little bit of chaos ensues, Turn your kids loose in the kitchen and then you clean up the mess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree, Sandy. I mean, I love listening to Jacob and Hezi, and I'm a common partaker of their Bible studies and prayer times, because I definitely am ignorant in many things, and so I want to learn from them. And so that's where this discussion is. I'm not trying to argue with them. I'm just like, this is clearly just trying to figure out, like, okay, what do my Jewish brothers and sisters really believe? What's the doctrine? And so, no, I agree with you.
Okay, it is almost midnight, and I am going to turn into a pumpkin. For the people who joined, thank you very much. And for the new people, hello. What did Chazi say? Some perspectives within Judaism, particularly in certain Orthodox and Noahide movements, view Christians who adhere to the 7 laws of Noah as fulfilling the status of a Ger Toshav. Yeah, generally, I tend to be aligned with those rabbis who say that that even a monarchical Trinitarian, but frankly, most rabbis, I would say, don't distinguish between various forms of Trinity, that the majority of them would say that Christians are basically Noahites. Last words. Sandy, last words.
Good night from 3 a.m.
Good night. Olson, last words.
Yeah, just thank you for letting me come on and have the ask these questions, and you know, I look forward to asking a lot more. I do consider myself a thoughtful somebody who has considered the Trinity, and I do believe it, but I don't feel like you know, like I'm okay if I'm an idolater or not. You know, I still have stuff to learn, whether I am or not. It doesn't matter. You know? So thank you so much. Have a great evening.
Good night. Give my best to your wife, but don't tell her that you were up late. Last words, Nick.
Love God with all your heart, soul, and mind.
And your fellow as yourself.
Yeah,
Don't
loving
forget
your
that part.
neighbors, loving God.
Yeah. Well, usually I would keep, I mean, there's 14 people watching, and I usually try to keep streaming, but sorry, it's late, and Lucky is going to destroy everything. Aren't you, Lucky? So good night, people. I will leave you with, well, first of all, this one.
I'm not sure who Fatarecci is. I can't tell.
And I'm going to use host's prerogative to put the Reverend Parcells to bed, because he does need to get up in the morning.
Sorry, Reverend. Thank you.
But before he goes, I have a question. Let's say, God forbid, that I were to burn somebody at the stake for not being a Trinitarian, and I did not repent of that. Is that a salvation issue?
Sometimes Jacob takes that devil's advocate thing too
Isn't there
far.
a proverb that says something like, "Don't answer a fool according to his folly."
But there's a proverb that says, "Answer a fool according to his folly."
There is.
Exactly right. And I'm going to leave it to you guys to determine, you know, which of those was applicable in this situation as I go. So, but anyhow, good.
Thank
It was
you,
good
Reverend.
to
Thank
chat
you.
with you all.
Thank you.
Good night.
The